Breaking news in Spain, some devastating news actually for Real Madrid and the Brazilian national team. Now, according to multiple reports, Rodrygo has suffered a torn ACL. Now, the Brazilian winger suffered the injury during Real Madrid's loss to Getafe yesterday, and that injury would force him out of the rest of the La Liga season and this summer's World Cup with Brazil. Devastating news, guys. We spoke earlier on in the show about Real Madrid, how yesterday wasn't a good night for them, but it seems to be getting worse, doesn't it, Geoff?
Yeah, terrible, terrible night for Real Madrid, but even more devastating for the player. But what is strange is that he played on for 20 minutes, didn't he, Mike? Which is how much damage that did, we don't know. I don't have the medical expertise, but your season is over. It's been a disappointing season for him with Real Madrid anyway. He's been, let's be honest, he's been kind of pushed aside, and now. And he could have got through the season thinking, I've got the World Cup to look forward to. He's a mainstay of the Brazilian team. And now, that's over. Terrible, terrible for the guy.
How do you carry on a game with the torn ACL?
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, as a former player, I've had injuries. I've never had a knee injury like that. And I just feel for him in so many different ways because before the season even began, Geoff, remember, he was being pushed out of the club practically almost before a ball was kicked. Right? There were rumors that he was going to the Premier League. And then it just looked like things were going to start kicking on a bit. Injuries kind of derailed a bit of kind of setting him back, a bit of getting back in the team. But ultimately, any player playing football right now, the main goal isn't just club football. It's the World Cup. And this is why you practice, why you play. This is why you put every single bit of effort in the season to be ready. This just sums up, for me, the direction Real Madrid season's going. Right? It's just been such a disappointment. And to lose him, you already lost Kylian Mbappe out indefinitely with another knee injury, right? You've had other players that had knee injuries. I think of Dani Carvajal's had knee injuries. Antonio Rudiger's had knee injuries. Eduardo Camavinga's had knee injuries. So there's clearly something going on with Real Madrid in terms of that body part and in terms of players who have succumbed to injuries from the Club World Cup. But when it pertains to Rodrygo, I just really feel for him because without Kylian Mbappe, if there was anyone who was going to take the mantle alongside Vinny Jr., he was the next in line to step up and really fill that void. And so it just feels like their season's gone by the wayside.
Yeah, OK, we're going to be bringing in our CBS Sports Brazilian football correspondent, Mbizo Mzamane. Mbizo, thank you very much for joining us. Devastating news, this breaking news coming out of Real Madrid for Rodrygo. Now looking at the Brazilian side of things with the World Cup just around the corner, how will they replace him going into this summer?
Well, he's certainly difficult to replace, isn't he? His profile as a footballer, I think the level that Brazil was hoping that he would bring to the Seleção during the World Cup. In a difficult time for the Seleção as well. They can't really be affording to lose players of his caliber. So it's a difficult task. I think Ancelotti will feel this really derails some of the plans that he had, and I think the CBF will be extremely disappointed. I do think, however, that there are a lot of options that could replace him. And I think in particular, the Brazilian fan might feel that, Rodrygo's an enigmatic figure. He hasn't always produced as well as he could for the Seleção. And again, as Geoff has mentioned, he hasn't had a great season with Real Madrid. In fact, a number of seasons where you've wondered if he's really a bit part player at Madrid or an important player at Madrid. And I think, those kinds of thoughts were beginning to creep into the Seleção as well. But nonetheless, a player of his caliber, a player of his now experience, despite his tender age, is going to be a huge loss for the Seleção, in my opinion.
So, Mbizo, you talked about his time with the national team and maybe some unfulfilled potential, right? But when I look at the last couple of friendlies, I mean, he started 3 of the last 4. So it tells me there's a bit of faith that Carlo Ancelotti had in him going into the World Cup. Now that he's not going to be there, because ACL injuries take a long time, 6 to 7 months, where do they turn to next? You alluded to some of the players, but I want to know who are the key figures that could maybe take advantage of the situation and really step up because their time is now.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was a lot of competition for places anyway in this national team, weren't there? And especially players like Esteban, I think, right now, who you weren't sure because of his age if they would depend on him in a tournament as large as the World Cup. But then you begin to wonder now if he isn't the most natural replacement. And of course, you have some players listed there. For me, Rafinha is obviously going to be an important player. Vinicius Jr. is going to be an important player. So, I think the key question is who do they play up front? Because Rodrygo also was able to double as a striker, along with Vinicius Jr. I think sometimes Ancelotti played them in that manner. So there's a lot of options. I think they're going to have to maybe toy around with pushing players into positions they're not necessarily comfortable in. But again, a player as top quality as Rodrygo, who's also as versatile as he is going to be extremely difficult to replace. But I think there's a number of different options, especially if they decide to switch around formations and to push players into positions that may not be their favorite, but they can play them.
Who do you think the fans will want in Mbizo? Because often, the coach will think one thing, but is there a fan's favourite who has been on the fringes, but they'd really like to see get a shift now?
I think Brazilian fans, Esteval has to play, I think, but also Endrick needs to play. I think Brazilian fans want Endrick playing. And if that's the case, you might be looking at, an attacking three in the midfield with Rafinha, Vinicius Jr., and maybe Esteval, and then Endrick at 9. I think the way he's been performing as well in France has really been garnering attention. But he's a player that the fans in Brazil have always had faith in, and he can definitely play in that position. Mateus Cunha, actually, which you guys have visited there as well, can also play in the 10 position, and either of the sides. So they do have some versatility, but it doesn't mean that Rodrygo won't be a miss. But there certainly are players there that can do the job. And again, as Rodrygo hasn't been particularly, consistent with Real Madrid or with the Brazilian national team, I think many fans in particular might say, look, there's an opportunity for another player to step up. But, I'm a huge fan of Rodrygo, and I think it's a huge loss for the national team. And I think for his career, this is quite devastating at this point in time.
Mbizo, man, I thought you were going to lead with the elephant in the room, right? I mean, what are the odds now for Neymar? Because we talked about this on Numbers Don't Lie. It's the constant conversation I've heard in reports in Brazil, right, in the Brazilian media, that maybe this could be the pathway back for him into the national team. I know I want it to happen. What are people in Brazil saying, and what's the actual reality of it happening for the World Cup?
I mean, I think one thing we can agree on there, Mikey, is that Neymar is never out of the conversation. People are always talking about him, but we're also always talking about whether he's fit enough. I think the question with Neymar has never been, can he be a contributor to the national team? The question with Neymar has always been, can he be healthy enough to provide the contributions that we know he's capable of? And that, again, is always the question. He hasn't been particularly sterling with Santos, and again, that's another issue. But also people wonder, again, where Neymar's head is. So the conversation is there. Is there an opportunity for him? Of course. But I think many people would argue that there are players in the attacking positions in a general sense that are performing at a higher level than Neymar in highly competitive leagues, more competitive than Brasileirão, arguably. And so maybe those players would be the ones that get a look in before Neymar. Again, can Neymar get healthy? Is his head in the right place?
Mbizo, we've seen him in the last few weeks, and Neymar, he looks much slimmer, he looks fitter, he quite literally looks leaner and hungrier. And when I saw that, my first thought was, he wants to play in the World Cup. And he really looks the part.
Yeah,
has that made an impression, do you think?
Yes, it absolutely has. Again, Ancelotti's paying attention, and he's the one player who's probably being scrutinized more than any other, despite being on the fringes, because of who he is and because of what he can provide. And it hasn't gone unnoticed that he's been playing a bit better. He's been a bit sharper. Even mentally, he seems to have a little bit more bite. But the questions still remain. Will he maintain that rhythm? Will he be able to maintain his health? Because again, if you watch him in the leagues, if you watch him in the games, he receives a lot of contact. He's not just player that's struggling with fitness. He's actually targeted by other teams because they know what he's capable of. So, whether he can maintain this form, maintain this ability and this capacity, intensity, is yet to be seen. But I think he can knock on the door. He is knocking on the door. It's up to Ancelotti to decide whether Neymar is good enough to contribute in the way that he's capable of.
And Mbizo, you look at Brazil's group, they're in Group C of the World Cup. They're going to be taking on Scotland, Haiti and Morocco. Now with Rodrygo's injury, how has that affected their chances of potentially them getting out of this group stage?
Getting out of the group, I don't think it has. I think they will believe that they have the quality to get out of that group with some relative ease. They'll probably believe, and rightly so, that Morocco is probably the next strongest team in that group. Maybe the Scottish might argue against that, but I believe that's pretty clear cut. And I believe that Brazil will think that they have the quality still. A player like Rodrygo, I think, will really be missed in the knockout rounds. You know, when you're playing against really top quality squads, whom Rodrygo is accustomed to playing against the players of those teams in the various leagues that he plays in at the level that he plays in. And I think that's where he'll be missed most. But getting out of the group, I don't think that will cause Brazil any concern. And if they do struggle to get out of the group, that's going to be a big conversation in the CBF.
And Mbizo, just to finish up, man, I know when one player isn't part of the fold, many other things tends to happen, right? Just given the magnitude of this news, what is the feeling going on in Brazil around Brazilian fans reacting to one of their key players now being out of the World Cup?
You know, again, Mikey, with Rodrygo, it's really complicated because he is a polarizing figure here. I think you have many people who are holding their heads and saying, oh, my God, you know, one less opportunity. In a time where we needed all of our best players, Rodrygo is missing, and this is going to complicate our World Cup, you know, campaign even more. And, you know, Brazilians haven't been particularly confident about their chances going into this World Cup because of previous performances in large tournaments and because of just the general level of Brazil, you know, including through qualifying. But then you have a section of the fans who say to themselves, well, how much has he truly contributed to the national team? He's played well in the last couple of games, but over the long haul, he hasn't necessarily been Brazil's most consistent player, despite, for example, myself believing that he has the potential to be a leader in this team, statistically, and just in terms of his overall presence. So he's a polarizing figure. I think Brazil right now will be split. There's opportunities for other players, younger players, and there are others who will say, how are we going to do this without him? He's one of our key players. So I think as time goes on and we get closer to the World Cup, we see the things like the availability of Neymar. Will he be selected? You know, I think time will tell how the Brazilian fans will really come to terms with this.
Thank you very much, Mbizo. We appreciate your time. It's just been made.
So
it's just been made official as well by Brazil. Rodrygo has suffered a rupture of the ACL and lateral meniscus in his right leg. A devastating blow for the Brazilian.
Thanks for watching this video from Morning Footy. For all news and insights regarding leagues around the world like EFL, Serie A, and all UEFA competitions, both men's and women's, don't forget to sign up for Paramount Plus.